No one could calm the billionaire's twins until the poor maid's toddler did what no one expected. But when the billionaire saw her wearing the necklace he gave his fiancée few years ago, what he did was unimaginable. No one inside the Hale mansion dared to say Amelia West's name anymore, but every corner of that billion-dollar home still remembered her. Her portrait remained locked behind a private gallery door, her favorite piano sat untouched beside the grand staircase, and her empty bedroom was cleaned every morning by servants who were ordered never to ask why billionaire Everett Hale still kept a wedding dress hanging in the closet. But on the night of his company's charity gala, the secret he had buried for years began to breathe again. His 5-year-old twins, Noah and Nora, suddenly began screaming in the middle of the crystal ballroom. The music stopped. The champagne glasses trembled. The guests turned. 3 nannies rushed forward, but the twins pushed them away. A pediatric specialist whispered calming exercises, but Noah kicked over a chair. Everett's mother tried to hold Nora, but the little girl sobbed harder and cried, "She's here, she's here." Everett froze. He was a billionaire who could buy silence, security, doctors, mansions, and loyalty, but he could not calm the 2 children who had not slept peacefully since the woman he loved disappeared a few years ago. Then the poor maid, Clara Bennett, stepped out from the servants' hallway with panic on her face and her toddler daughter Rosie holding the edge of her faded uniform. Clara had only come to collect a dropped tray, but Rosie slipped from her hand before anyone could stop her. The toddler walked straight through the shocked guests, past the expensive gowns, past the polished shoes, past the billionaire himself, and stopped in front of the twins. Noah and Nora stared at her. Rosie lifted one tiny finger to her lips. Then she hummed a lullaby. Everett's face lost all color. It was Amelia's lullaby. The same soft tune his fiancée used to hum to the twins when they were newborns. The same tune he had forbidden anyone to play after the night Amelia vanished. The same tune that had once floated through the mansion before the police reports, the unanswered calls, the rumors, and the sealed family secrets. The twins stopped crying. Not slowly. Not gradually. Instantly. Nora reached for Rosie like she had known her all her life, but Clara rushed forward and grabbed her daughter, whispering, "Rosie, no." That was when the little girl's collar shifted. A silver necklace slipped into view. A blue teardrop stone caught the chandelier light. Everett saw it, and the world around him disappeared. That necklace was not just jewelry. He had given it to Amelia a few years ago, the night before their wedding was supposed to be announced publicly. He had fastened it around her neck with trembling hands and told her, "Wear this until the day I make you my wife." But Amelia disappeared the next morning. No ransom. No body. No goodbye. Only the necklace was missing with her. Now it was hanging around the neck of a poor maid's toddler. Clara tried to hide it, but Everett had already seen the engraving on the back. EH to AW forever, even when the world turns against us. The guests whispered. The twins clung to Rosie. Clara backed away like a woman, standing at the edge of a secret too dangerous to survive. Everett stepped toward her, not like a billionaire approaching a servant, but like a broken man walking toward the answer that could either heal him or destroy what was left of his family. "Where did your daughter get that necklace?" he asked. Clara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then Rosie looked up at Everett with innocent eyes and whispered, "Mama said I must never show you." The ballroom fell silent. Everett stared at the toddler, then at Clara, then at his twins, who were still holding Rosie's hands as if they had just found someone they had been waiting for. Who was Rosie's mother? Why did the poor maid's toddler know Amelia's lullaby? How did she get the necklace Everett gave his fiancée few years ago? And when the billionaire realized the answer had been living under his own roof, what unimaginable thing did he do next? Dear viewers, this story will show you why money cannot buy truth, why poor people should never be judged by appearance, and why children often reveal what adults hide. You will learn about love, class, betrayal, forgiveness, motherhood, and the danger of burying secrets. Watch closely because every clue matters. Tell us in the comments what lesson you learned and what you would have done in Clara's place. Subscribe for more interesting, entertaining, and educative stories like this. By 6 o'clock that evening, the Hale mansion looked like a palace built for celebration. But beneath the chandeliers, polished floors, and white roses, every servant knew the house was only pretending to be happy. The charity gala was supposed to begin at 7, but the mansion had been awake since dawn. Florists carried crystal vases through the marble foyer, chefs moved silver trays through the kitchen, violinists tested their strings near the ballroom, and security guards checked the gates twice, but no one stepped too close to the locked hallway behind the west staircase. That hallway belonged to the past. At the end of it was a private gallery door, and behind that door was Amelia West's portrait. No servant had seen it uncovered in years, but everyone knew it was there, because billionaire Everett Hale had once dismissed an entire cleaning team after one maid whispered that the woman in the painting looked sad. Since then, Amelia's name had become a shadow in the mansion. People walked around it. People lowered their voices near it. People pretended not to notice that Everett still kept fresh white lilies outside a locked bedroom every Friday morning. Clara Bennett noticed, but she never spoke. She could not afford to speak. At 28, Clara had learned that poor people survived by seeing everything and saying almost nothing. She arrived every morning before sunrise from the small staff cottage behind the estate, carrying her toddler daughter, Rosie, on one hip and a bag of folded cleaning cloths on the other. The other workers sometimes judged her for bringing a child into a billionaire's mansion, but Clara had no family nearby, no husband to help, and no money for daycare. Mrs. Voss, the head housekeeper, had allowed it only because Rosie was quiet. Too quiet sometimes. The little girl rarely cried, rarely demanded attention, and rarely wandered where she was not supposed to go, but whenever she passed the west staircase, she always stopped. That evening was no different. Clara moved quickly through the servants' hallway with Rosie beside her, but the toddler suddenly slowed near the staircase and looked toward the locked gallery door. "Not there," Clara whispered. Rosie held the tiny cloth doll pressed against her chest, but her eyes stayed fixed on the hallway. "Mama," she said softly. Clara froze. She bent down fast, lowering her voice before anyone could hear. "Rosie, we don't say that here." Rosie blinked at her, innocent and solemn. "The singing lady is sad." Clara's face tightened, but she forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. "There is no singing lady, sweetheart." The lie hurt as soon as she said it. Before Rosie could answer, Mrs. Voss appeared from the kitchen entrance with a clipboard in her hand and impatience in her eyes. "Clara, the ballroom floor needs one last polish, and the guest powder room is missing hand towels," she said, but her gaze dropped to Rosie. "And keep that child away from the family wing tonight. Mr. Hale is already in a dangerous mood." Clara nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Voss leaned closer. "The twins have been unsettled all afternoon." Clara looked toward the grand staircase. Everyone in the mansion knew about Noah and Nora Hale. The 5-year-old twins were beautiful children with their father's dark hair and their mother's soft gray eyes, but grief had shaped them in ways money could not smooth away. They screamed in their sleep, refused new nannies, and sometimes sat on the nursery floor facing the door as though waiting for someone who had promised to return. Everett had hired specialists from Boston, child therapists from California, and sleep consultants from London, but none of them stayed long. The twins did not trust strangers. They barely trusted family. And they never trusted anyone who smelled like expensive perfume. Clara had learned that detail during her first week at the mansion, when a socialite bent down to kiss Nora's cheek, and the little girl slapped the air between them, crying, "Not mommy." After that, Clara understood something the rich people did not seem to understand. The children were not badly behaved. They were haunted. Rosie tugged at Clara's skirt. Clara looked down and saw that the toddler's hand had slipped under the collar of her plain blue dress. Her fingers were wrapped around the necklace. Clara's heart jumped. "Rosie," she whispered sharply, kneeling again, "keep it hidden." Rosie looked confused. "It's pretty." "I know, but pretty things can still be dangerous." The moment Clara said it, she remembered the woman who had pressed that necklace into her palm almost 3 years earlier. A hospital corridor. A storm outside the windows. A pale face beneath tangled blonde hair. A voice so weak Clara had to lean close to hear it. "If anything happens to me," the woman had whispered, "keep her safe. Don't let Everett see the necklace until you know who betrayed me." Clara had wanted answers that night, but the woman had disappeared before dawn, leaving behind a newborn child, a silver necklace, and a secret that had dragged Clara into a world far above her station. Now that secret was standing in a billionaire's mansion, wearing Mary Jane shoes with scuffed toes, and asking why the singing lady was sad. Clara tucked the necklace back under Rosie's collar. "No one can see this tonight," she said. Rosie nodded, but her small hand stayed near her chest. From upstairs, a door slammed. The sound rolled through the mansion like thunder. Everyone in the foyer stiffened. Everett Hale appeared at the top of the grand staircase in a black tuxedo, his face calm enough for guests and cold enough for enemies. He was handsome in the way powerful men often were, but there was nothing soft about him except the way his eyes changed when he looked toward the nursery hall. His mother, Vivian Hale, followed behind him in a silver gown, but her elegance could not hide the irritation in her voice. "You cannot cancel another gala because the children are emotional," Vivian said. Everett stopped halfway down the stairs. "They are not emotional, they are terrified." Vivian lowered her voice, but Clara still heard her. "They need discipline, not another specialist." Everett turned slowly. "They need their mother." The foyer went silent. Even the florists stopped moving. Vivian's expression hardened, but Everett looked away first, as if saying Amelia's name without saying it had opened a wound he was tired of bleeding from. At that exact moment, Noah and Nora appeared at the upstairs railing in matching cream outfits chosen for the gala. Nora clutched a stuffed rabbit. Noah held her hand. They looked down at the glittering ballroom below, but their faces were pale. "Daddy," Nora whispered. Everett's expression softened immediately. "I'm here." Noah pointed toward the west hallway. Clara's stomach tightened. "She's singing again," Noah said. Vivian closed her eyes with frustration. "Not tonight." Everett climbed back up 2 steps. "Who is singing?" Nora's lip trembled. "The lady behind the door." A few workers exchanged nervous glances, but nobody spoke. Clara pulled Rosie closer. Rosie, however, was staring at the twins with a strange familiarity, as though she had heard them before in a dream. Then she began humming under her breath. It was barely a sound. Zovd. Tiny. Almost swallowed by the noise of the mansion. But Everett heard it. His head turned. Clara stopped breathing. The lullaby lasted only 3 notes before she covered Rosie's mouth gently with her hand. Everett's eyes narrowed from the staircase, not angry yet, but alert. He looked at Clara, then at Rosie, then at the small hand Clara had pressed too quickly against her daughter's lips. For 1 dangerous second, no one moved. Mrs. Voss rushed into the silence. "Clara, the towels." "Yes, ma'am," Clara said, lifting Rosie into her arms so quickly the child's doll fell to the floor. Rosie reached for it, but Clara was already backing away. Everett watched her. Clara felt his stare, like a hand between her shoulders. She escaped into the servants' corridor, but just before the swinging door closed behind her, she heard Nora cry out from upstairs. "Daddy, don't let the little girl leave." Clara stopped behind the door, shaking. Rosie looked over her shoulder toward the ballroom. "She knows me," Rosie whispered. Clara's blood went cold. "Who knows you?" she asked. Rosie touched the hidden necklace beneath her dress. "The crying girl," she said, "and the lady who sings." Before Clara could answer, the first guests began arriving at the front entrance. The gala had begun. And somewhere upstairs, the Billionaire's twins started screaming. The first scream came from upstairs before the first toast could be made. At first, the guests in the ballroom pretended not to hear it. That was what wealthy people did when pain entered a room uninvited. They adjusted their pearls, lifted their glasses, turned their faces toward the orchestra, and smiled harder, but the second scream was sharper than the first. Then the third came from both twins at once. The violinists stopped playing. A champagne glass slipped from a senator's wife's hand and shattered near the white roses. Everett Hale had been speaking with 2 hospital donors near the marble fireplace, but his head lifted before anyone said a word. His body knew that sound before his mind could name it. His children, Noah and Nora. He moved toward the staircase at once, but Vivian caught his arm. "Everett," she whispered, smiling tightly for the guests, "let the nanny handle it." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. "Take your hand off me." Vivian released him as though burned. Above them, Noah appeared at the top of the stairs, barefoot now, his cream jacket hanging crooked from one shoulder. Nora stood beside him, clutching her rabbit with both hands, her mouth open in a scream that did not sound like a tantrum. It sounded like terror. "Daddy," Noah cried. Everett took the stairs 2 at a time. The lead nanny, Miss Alden, hurried after the twins with panic shining on her face. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry," they were calm, but then Nora saw something near the west hallway and... "No more excuses," Vivian said from below. Everett ignored her and knelt in front of his children. "I'm here," he said, opening his arms. "Come to me." Nora shook her head. That small refusal wounded him more than any betrayal in a boardroom ever had. Noah pointed down the hall toward the locked gallery. "She was there," he said. "The singing lady was there." Everett's jaw tightened. "No one is there." "She was," Nora sobbed. "She said Rosie." Everett froze. Downstairs, a few guests exchanged looks. "Rosie." The name had traveled through the ballroom like a spark. From behind the service door, Clara heard it too. She stood in the narrow hallway beside the pantry, one hand pressed to Rosie's back, the other gripping the edge of a silver tray so hard her knuckles turned white. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Rosie looked up at her. "They're scared." "I know. They neighed the song." Clara crouched in front of her daughter. "You cannot go out there." "But they're calling." The innocence in Rosie's voice nearly broke Clara, because she knew children did not understand danger the way adults did. Children believed fear could be fixed with a song, a hug, or a hand held in the dark. Adults knew some fears came with lawyers, sealed records, threats, and powerful families who buried the truth beneath marble floors. "Rosie," Clara said gently, "listen to me. You stay with me tonight." Before the toddler could answer, Mrs. Voss pushed through the corridor door, breathless. "Clara, Mr. Hale asked for you." Clara's heart slammed once. "For me?" He heard the child humming earlier. Mrs. Voss glanced at Rosie, and now Miss Nora keeps saying her name. Clara stood slowly. "Tell him I'm cleaning the guest powder room." Mrs. Voss's expression softened for the first time that evening. "Clara, I don't know what this is, but you cannot hide from him inside his own house." That was when Nora's scream rose again, louder, rower, tearing through the mansion until even the kitchen staff stopped working. Rosie began to cry silently. Not loudly, not dramatically. Only 2 tears sliding down her cheeks as she stared toward the ballroom. She hurts, Rosie whispered. Clara closed her eyes. A memory flashed through her mind before she could stop it. A hospital nursery. A newborn girl wrapped in a faded pink blanket. A trembling woman reaching through the betrayal, touching the baby's cheek and whispering, "She will know the song. Barbies remember what love sounds like." Clara had not understood then. Now she feared she understood too much. In the ballroom, Everett carried Nora halfway down the staircase, but the little girl fought against him, not with anger, but with desperation. "No, Daddy, no, she's leaving." "No one is leaving," Everett said, though his voice had lost its certainty. Noah clung to the railing. "Rosie knows Mommy." A silence fell so completely that even the air seemed to step back. Everett looked at his son. "What did you say?" Noah's chin trembled. "She knows Mommy's song." Vivian moved forward at once. "That is enough. These children have been encouraged in their fantasies for too long." Everett turned on her. "Do not speak." The command landed like a door slamming shut. For years, Vivian Hale had ruled the mansion's social life, its staff, its appearances, and its public grief, but in that moment, even she stepped back. Everett looked toward the servants' entrance. "Bring the maid and her child." No one moved. Then the service door opened. Clara stepped into the ballroom, carrying Rosie in her arms. Every eye turned to them. The contrast was almost cruel. Clara wore a plain black maid's dress with a white apron still damp from work. Her hair was pinned carelessly because she had not expected anyone important to look at her. Rosie wore a simple blue dress, one Clara had mended twice at the hem. Around them glittered diamond necklaces, satin gowns, tailored tuxedos, and people who had never wondered whether they could afford a winter coat. Clara felt every difference between their world and hers. But Rosie only saw the twins. Nora stopped screaming. Noah stopped shaking. Everett saw it happen. His daughter stared at Rosie as if a door had opened inside her memory. "Put me down," Nora whispered. Everett obeyed slowly. Nora walked down the remaining steps, her rabbit dragging behind her. Noah followed, his eyes locked on Rosie. Clara held Rosie tighter. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale," she said quickly. "She didn't mean to disturb anything. I'll take her back." "No," Nora cried. Rosie wriggled gently in Clara's arms. "Mama, please." The word struck Everett strangely. Mama. Not Mommy. Not Clara. Mama. Clara swallowed hard. Rosie. But Rosie reached for the floor. For a moment, Clara held on. Then she saw Noah's face. A little boy trying to be brave, but failing. She let Rosie down. The toddler crossed the ballroom in slow, tiny steps. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even the guests who had come for charity and gossip watched like they were seeing something sacred and dangerous at the same time. Rosie stopped in front of Nora. Nora stared at her, eyes wet. "Do you know the song?" Rosie nodded. "Did she teach you?" Noah asked. Clara's breath caught. Rosie tilted her head, the lady with the soft hands. Everett went still. Vivian's face sharpened. "What lady?" Everett asked. Rosie looked up at him, but before she could answer, Clara stepped forward. "She's a child, sir. Children imagine things." Everett's eyes did not leave Rosie. "Let her answer." The toddler looked back at the twins, then lifted one finger to her lips. And she hummed. The tune was soft at first, almost too small for the ballroom. 3 notes. Then 4. Then the melody Everett had spent years trying to forget filled the silence. Amelia's lullaby. Everett felt the past open beneath his feet. He saw Amelia in the nursery, barefoot on the rug, holding both newborn twins against her chest while moonlight touched her hair. He heard her laugh when he asked where the melody came from. He remembered her answer. "My mother sang it when I was afraid. One day, if I'm not there, they'll still know I loved them." Back then, he had pulled her close and told her not to talk like that. The next morning, she was gone. Now a poor maid's toddler was standing in his ballroom, humming the same song. Noah began to cry again, but this time quietly. Nora reached for Rosie's hand. Rosie gave it to her. The twins moved closer until the three children stood in a small circle beneath the chandelier, holding hands like they had known one another before any adult had introduced them. A few guests wiped their eyes. Others leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Everett could not move. Clara could barely breathe. Then Nora whispered, "Mommy sent her." The words cut through the room. Vivian stepped forward, her voice cold. "Enough, this is emotional manipulation." Rosie flinched at Vivian's tone and turned toward Clara. That tiny movement changed everything. As Rosie turned, the collar of her blue dress slipped sideways. A silver chain flashed under the chandelier. Clara saw it and rushed forward. "Rosie, come here." But it was too late. The blue teardrop stone fell against the toddler's chest. Everett's eyes dropped to it. The mansion disappeared. The guests disappeared. Even the twins seemed to blur around the edges. Only the necklace remained. Silver chain. Blue stone. Tiny scratch along the clasp from the night Amelia had laughed and said he had fastened it too tightly. Everett stepped closer. Clara backed away, but Rosie was still holding Nora's hand. "Where did she get that?" Everett asked. His voice was low, but everyone heard the danger in it. Clara shook her head. "It's nothing." Everett's eyes rose to hers. "Do not lie to me." Vivian looked from the necklace to Clara, and for the first time that night, fear cracked through her perfect expression. That fear told Clara more than any confession could have. Everett crouched slowly in front of Rosie. His hand trembled as he touched the edge of the pendant, but he did not pull it from her. He turned it gently until the back caught the light. The engraving was still there. EH to AW forever, even when the world turns against us. Everett closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were no longer cold. They were broken. "Clara," he said, standing slowly, "where did your daughter get the necklace I gave my fiancé a few years ago?" Clara could have lied. She had rehearsed lies for years. She could have said she found it at a market. She could have said a stranger gave it to her. She could have said it was a copy, a coincidence, a cheap imitation. But Vivian was watching her. And in Vivian's eyes, Clara saw the warning. "Say nothing." Rosie looked up at Everett. "Mama said I must never show you," she whispered. The ballroom went silent. Everett stared at the toddler, then at Clara, then at his mother. Noah gripped Rosie's hand tighter. Nora whispered, "Daddy, don't let Grandma take her away." Vivian's face went pale. Everett turned slowly toward his mother. "What does Nora mean by that?" Vivian opened her mouth, but before she could speak, every light in the ballroom suddenly went out. And in the darkness, Clara felt someone grab Rosie. For 1 second, the Hale mansion became nothing but screams, footsteps, and darkness. The chandeliers went black. The orchestra instruments clattered. Guests gasped and stumbled against one another as the ballroom dissolved into panic. Everett heard Nora cry first. Then Noah. Then Rosie. That last cry struck Clara so hard she moved before she could think. "Rosie," she shouted, pushing through the darkness. Someone's shoulder slammed into her. A glass broke near her foot. A woman screamed that her bracelet was missing, but Clara heard only the sound of her daughters struggling. Tiny shoes scraped against the marble. A muffled voice whispered, "Quiet." Clara lunged toward the sound, but a hand shoved her back. She hit the edge of a table and nearly fell, but Everett caught her arm. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I don't know," Clara said, breathless. "Someone took her." For the first time since Clara had entered that mansion, Everett Hale looked less like a billionaire and more like a father standing at the edge of losing another piece of his life. "Security," he roared. Emergency lights flickered on along the walls, painting the ballroom in red shadows. The guests looked ghostly. The white roses looked blood-colored under the dim glow. Everett's security team rushed toward the exits, but the mansion had too many doors, too many service corridors, too many hidden passages built for rich families who wanted privacy and servants who needed to stay invisible. That invisibility had once helped Clara survive. Tonight, it could help someone steal her child. Noah stood frozen near the staircase, holding Nora's hand. Both children were crying, but neither moved away from the spot where Rosie had been. Nora pointed toward the west hallway. "She went there," she whispered. Everett turned. "Who?" Nora shook her head. "The woman with the black gloves." Vivian Hale stepped forward quickly. "She is confused." The lights went out, people panicked, and... "No," Noah interrupted, his voice small but firm. "Grandma saw her too." The words sliced through the room. Vivian's lips parted, but no sound came out. Everett looked at his mother, then at Clara, then toward the west hallway where Amelia's locked portrait waited behind a door no one was allowed to open. "Lock down the estate," he said. "No one leaves." Security moved instantly. Guests began protesting, but Everett ignored them. A mayor complained about being treated like a suspect. A donor threatened to withdraw funding from the hospital wing. A television host whispered into her phone, but Everett's voice rose over all of them. "A child was taken in my house," he said. "Anyone more concerned about their reputation than her safety can explain that to the police." The room fell silent. Clara's chest rose and fell too fast. "Mr. Hale, the servants' corridor behind the west hallway connects to the laundry room and the old garden exit." Everett's eyes snapped to her. "Show me." Vivian stepped in front of them. "Everett, think carefully. You cannot go chasing shadows through this house in front of everyone." He leaned close to her. "Move." Vivian moved. Clara ran first. Everett followed. Behind them, Noah and Nora tried to follow too, but Miss Alden held them back. "No," Nora cried. "Rosie needs the song." Everett paused for half a second, pain crossing his face, but Clara did not stop. She knew the service corridors better than any security guard. She knew which door stuck in winter, which staircase groaned on the third step, and which hallway camera had been broken for 2 weeks because Vivian said repairs could wait until after the gala. The west hallway was colder than the ballroom. The air smelled faintly of lilies and locked rooms. Clara reached the gallery door and stopped. It was open. That should have been impossible. The portrait room had been locked since before Clara was hired, and Mrs. Voss kept the key in a cabinet that required Vivian's approval. Everett stared at the open door as if it had become a mouth ready to speak. Inside, a single emergency light glowed above the portrait. Amelia West looked down from the canvas. She was young, beautiful, and still in a way that made the room feel unfinished. Her grey eyes seemed alive under the dim red light, and around the painted neck was the same blue teardrop necklace Rosie had worn minutes earlier. Clara could not look away. Everett walked into the room slowly. For a moment, the missing fiancée was no longer a mystery in a painting. She was a memory standing between them. She hated this portrait, Everett said quietly. Clara turned toward him. His voice had changed. It no longer sounded like a command. It sounded like confession. She said the artist painted her like a woman trapped in someone else's house. Clara swallowed. That one sentence shook loose something she had tried not to remember. A hospital room. A trembling hand. A woman whispering, "People think he owns everything, but not me, not my children, not my truth." Clara's eyes filled, but she blinked fast. This was not the time. A faint sound came from behind the portrait wall. A tiny cough. Clara rushed forward. "Rosie." Everett stepped beside the portrait and pressed against the wood paneling. Nothing happened. Clara looked down and saw scratches near the floor. Fresh scratches. Someone had dragged the panel open. She dropped to her knees, feeling along the edge until her fingers found a narrow brass latch hidden beneath the molding. The wall clicked. Everett pulled it open. A dark passage appeared behind Amelia's portrait. Cold air breathed out. Clara's heart pounded. "Rosie," she called. A small voice answered from inside the passage. "Mama." Clara nearly collapsed from relief, but Everett held out an arm. "Wait." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, using the light to scan the passage. It was narrow, dusty, and old, with brick walls and a low ceiling. Servants must have used it generations ago, back when wealthy families built houses with secret routes and then pretended the people who used them did not exist. Rosie sat on the floor about 20 feet inside, her cheeks wet, her dress wrinkled, and her necklace still shining against her chest. No one was holding her now. Clara rushed in and gathered her daughter into her arms. Rosie clung to her neck. "The lady told me to hide." Clara pulled back. "What lady?" Rosie pointed deeper into the passage. "Not the bad one, the soft one." Everett stepped closer. "Rosie, who took you?" The toddler looked toward the dark end of the passage and whispered, "The black glove lady." Clara's stomach twisted. Everett stood and shone his phone light down the passage. There were footprints in the dust. One set small, from Rosie. One set larger. A woman's shoes. The prince led away from the portrait room and toward the old garden exit. Everett's face hardened. Security missed her. Clara held Rosie tighter. Someone knew the passage. Everett looked at her, and someone knew the lights would go out. A noise sounded behind them. Vivian stood at the entrance to the hidden passage. Her face was pale, but her voice was composed. "Thank God the child is safe." Clara felt Rosie shrink against her. Everett noticed. He turned slowly. "How did you know we were here?" Vivian lifted her chin. "A security guard told me." "No guard came this way." Vivian's eyes flickered. It was brief. Almost nothing. But Everett saw it. Clara saw it too. Vivian stepped into the portrait room. "Everett, you are overwhelmed. This entire situation is turning into a spectacle. A maid's child appears wearing Amelia's necklace. The twins become hysterical. The lights fail, and now you are accusing your own mother." "I asked how you knew we were here." Vivian looked at Clara. "Perhaps your maid should explain why her child has been wearing stolen jewelry." Clara stood, Rosie in her arms. "I did not steal it." "Then where did it come from?" Clara's mouth went dry. This was the question she had feared for years. Everett looked at her with a terrible stillness. "Answer her." Clara looked at Rosie. The toddler's face was hidden against her shoulder, one hand clutching the necklace. Clara had promised to protect her. She had built their lives around that promise. She had endured insult, exhaustion, poverty, and fear because of that promise. But now the secret was no longer protecting Rosie. It was attracting danger. Clara took a shaking breath. A woman gave it to me. Everett's eyes sharpened. What woman? Clara glanced at Amelia's portrait. Vivian's face changed. The fear returned. Clara saw it and understood something with chilling clarity. Vivian had not been surprised by the necklace. She had been afraid of it. A woman at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Clara said, 3 years ago. Everett went still. 3 years ago. Clara nodded. Rosie had just been born. I was working nights there as a cleaner before I came to this estate. Everett's voice lowered. What was the woman's name? Clara looked at the portrait again. Amelia, she whispered. The word filled the room like a ghost finally given permission to breathe. Everett staggered back 1 step. Vivian grabbed the edge of a chair. Clara continued before fear could silence her. She was weak, terrified. She had no identification under her real name, but I recognized her later from the portrait when I came here. That night, she gave me the necklace and begged me to keep the baby safe. Everett's face drained of color. What baby? Clara's arms tightened around Rosie. No one spoke. The hidden passage seemed to hold its breath. Everett looked from Clara to Rosie, and the question formed in his eyes before his mouth could speak it. Clara shook her head quickly. I don't know everything, I swear I don't. Amelia disappeared before dawn. When I returned to the room, she was gone, but Rosie was still there. Everett's voice broke slightly. You are telling me Amelia was alive after she vanished? Yes. And you never told me. Clara's eyes filled. I was poor, I was nobody. She told me not to trust anyone connected to your family until I knew who betrayed her. I didn't know if that meant you. The words wounded him. Clara saw it. But she also saw that he did not deny the possibility fast enough, because even Everett Hale knew wealth surrounded itself with people who smiled while hiding knives. Vivian stepped forward. This is absurd. A hospital cleaner invents a story after being caught with stolen property, and you are listening because you are desperate. Rosie lifted her head. Her little eyes fixed on Vivian. You were there, she said. The room went silent. Vivian stared at the child. Clara's heart stopped. Everett knelt slowly. Rosie, what do you mean? Rosie looked confused by the weight of every adult stare. In the dream, the crying lady said the silver grandma closed the door. Vivian's hand trembled. Clara did not miss it. Everett did not miss it either. Silver grandma, he repeated. Noah and Nora suddenly appeared at the gallery entrance, having slipped away from Miss Alden. Nora clutched her rabbit. But her eyes were fixed on Vivian. That's what we call grandma when she wears the silver dress, Nora whispered. Vivian turned sharply. Who allowed them here? Noah stepped closer to Everett. The black-gloved lady smelled like grandma's flowers. Everett stood. The last softness left his face. Mother, he said, what did you do? Vivian's elegant mask cracked. For a second, she looked older, smaller, and angrier than Clara had ever seen her. Then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not belong in a room with frightened children. You always were too sentimental, Vivian said. Everett's voice was quiet. Answer me. Vivian looked toward Amelia's portrait, and hatred flickered across her face. That woman would have ruined everything. Before Everett could move, a security guard rushed into the doorway. Mr. Hale, he said, breathless, we found the garden exit open. Everett did not take his eyes off Vivian. Did you find the woman with black gloves? The guard hesitated. No, sir, but we found something in the bushes outside. He lifted a clear evidence bag. Inside was a black glove. And wrapped inside the glove was a hospital bracelet. Everett took the bag slowly. The name on the faded bracelet was barely readable, but Clara saw enough. Amelia West. Everett stared at it. Then a second line caught his eye. Infant female. Rosie Bennett was not written there. The baby's registered name was different. Everett looked at Clara, then at the child in her arms. What was the baby's name? Clara whispered. Everett's face twisted with shock. He read the bracelet aloud. Rose Amelia Hale. Rosie blinked at him. Noah and Nora stared. Vivian stepped backward. And from somewhere deep inside the hidden passage, a woman's voice whispered, weak but unmistakable. Everett. Everyone turned. Amelia's portrait stared silently from the wall. But the voice had come from behind it. For a moment, no one breathed. The voice was weak, almost swallowed by the walls, but Everett knew it the way a wounded man knew the sound of his own heartbeat. Everett. The name trembled through the hidden passage again. Clara tightened her arms around Rosie, but Rosie lifted her head as if she had heard that voice in dreams long before she had words. Noah stepped closer to Nora. Nora's stuffed rabbit slipped from her hand and fell silently on the floor. Vivian Hale did not move. Her face had turned so pale that the diamonds at her throat looked colder than ice. Everett walked toward the dark passage behind Amelia's portrait, but Clara grabbed his sleeve. Mr. Hale, she whispered, this could be a trap. He looked down at her hand. Years of class, money, power, and fear stood between them, but in that second, Clara was not a maid and he was not a billionaire. They were two people standing at the edge of a truth that could either save a family or destroy it. If she is alive, Everett said quietly, I have already lost too many years. He pulled free gently and stepped into the passage. The security guard raised his flashlight, but Everett took it from him and moved ahead alone. The narrow corridor stretched deeper than Clara expected. Dust covered the floor, yet one trail had been recently disturbed, as though someone had dragged something through it many times. Or someone. The thought made Clara's stomach tighten. Everett followed the sound, each step slower than the last. Amelia, he called. No answer came at first. Then a faint cough echoed from behind a second wall panel near the end of the passage. Everett pressed his hand against the bricks, searching. Clara shifted Rosie to one hip and stepped forward. Look near the floor. These old servant passages usually have release latches low enough to open while carrying trays. Everett looked back at her, surprised, but he listened. His fingers found a small iron ring hidden behind a loose stone. He pulled. A section of the wall opened inward with a heavy groan. Cold air spilled out. Behind it was a small room. Not a bedroom. Not a prison, exactly. Something worse. A forgotten storage chamber had been turned into a place where a person could be kept alive, hidden and unheard. There was a narrow cot, a metal water pitcher, a stack of old blankets, and a tiny high window covered from the outside by thick ivy. On the cot sat a woman. Her blonde hair had been cut unevenly. Her face was thinner than in the portrait, and her eyes carried years of darkness, but Clara recognized her instantly. Amelia West. Everett dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, throwing wild shadows on the walls. Amelia blinked against the light. Then she saw him. For a second, she looked terrified, as if love itself had become dangerous. Then her lips trembled. You found the necklace, she whispered. Everett crossed the room and fell to his knees in front of her. He did not touch her at first. He seemed afraid that if he reached out too quickly, she would disappear the way she had disappeared from every room, every call, every search, and every nightmare he had carried for years. Amelia, he said, but her name broke in his mouth. She raised a shaking hand and touched his cheek. Everett closed his eyes. Behind them, Noah and Nora stared from the passage entrance. They were too young to understand kidnapping, betrayal, power, and years stolen, but they understood the sound of their father crying without making noise. Rosie leaned out of Clara's arms. "Singing lady," she whispered. Amelia's eyes moved toward the toddler. Everything in her changed. The fear, the weakness, the confusion, none of it vanished, but love rose through it like light under a door. "Rose," Amelia breathed. Clara's knees nearly gave way. Rosie looked at Amelia, then at Clara. "Mammoth." The word broke Clara in a place she had tried to keep sealed. For 3 years, Clara had fed Rosie, bathed her, held her through fever, taught her prayers, kissed scraped knees, and slept beside her during storms. She had never once claimed the child as anything but her daughter in her heart, but now the truth stood before them with trembling hands and a mother's eyes. Amelia reached toward Rosie, but then stopped. Her hand hovered in the air. She looked at Clara with tears in her eyes. "You kept her safe." Clara could barely speak. "I tried." "You did more than try." That praise hurt worse than blame. Clara stepped into the small room and lowered Rosie carefully to the floor. Rosie did not rush. She walked slowly to Amelia, as if some part of her small heart knew this moment was too fragile for sudden movement. Amelia touched Rosie's hair. Then she looked at the necklace around her daughter's neck. "I told you not to show him until it was safe," Amelia whispered. Rosie nodded seriously, but Noah and Nora were crying. A sound escaped Amelia, half laugh and half sob. Everett turned sharply toward Vivian, who stood frozen in the passage doorway. "Explain," he said. Vivian's expression hardened, but her voice trembled around the edges. "You do not understand what she was going to do." Everett stood slowly. "She was going to marry me. She was going to take you away from everything your father built." Amelia flinched. Everett's eyes darkened. "You kept her here." Vivian lifted her chin. "I protected this family." "No," Clara said before she could stop herself. Vivian's gaze snapped toward her. "You forget your place." Clara held her ground, though fear shook her hands. "My place was beside a hospital bed when Amelia begged me to save her baby. My place was working in your kitchen while your grandchildren cried for a mother you hid behind a wall. My place was raising Rosie with nothing while this house had everything. So maybe I forgot your version of my place, Mrs. Hale, but I remember the truth." For once, Vivian had no quick answer. Everett looked at Clara, and something like respect passed across his face. Then he turned back to his mother. "Why?" Vivian's mask cracked completely. "Because she was not good enough," she said. "Because she came into this house with soft eyes and dangerous ideas. She wanted you to open the foundation records. She wanted to know why your father's old partners were being paid in secret. She wanted to expose accounts that would have destroyed the Hale name." Everett stared at her. "What accounts?" Amelia gripped the blanket. "Everett, your mother and 2 board members were using the Children's Charity Fund to move money through fake medical grants." The words landed harder than any scream. "The charity gala. The donors. The hospital wing. The perfect public image. All of it was built over rot." Vivian pointed at Amelia. She had no proof. "I did," Amelia whispered. Vivian stepped forward. "You had stolen documents. I had copies of records you tried to bury." Everett's voice became dangerously calm. "Where are they?" Amelia looked toward Clara. Clara's breath caught. Vivian saw the look and turned on her. "You." Clara remembered the night at the hospital more clearly than ever. Amelia had been feverish, terrified, and bruised by exhaustion, but she had still managed to press 3 things into Clara's hands: the necklace, the newborn baby, and a sealed envelope. Clara had hidden that envelope in the one place no Hale would ever search. Inside Rosie's cloth doll. The same doll Rosie had dropped earlier in the foyer. Clara looked toward the passage entrance. The doll was gone. Vivian smiled slightly. That smile told Clara everything. "You took it," Clara whispered. Vivian looked almost pleased. "A dirty toy left on a marble floor. I had it removed." Everett grabbed his phone. "Find the doll." The security guard nodded quickly and ran back toward the ballroom. Amelia tried to stand, but her legs failed her. Everett caught her before she fell. The twins stepped into the room at last. Nora's voice was tiny, "Mommy." Amelia looked at them. All the years in that hidden room seemed to collapse into one unbearable second. "Noah," she whispered, "Nora." The twins ran to her. Everett helped Amelia lower herself so they could reach her, and when the children wrapped their arms around their mother, the small room filled with a sound no chandelier, violin, or Billionaire's speech could ever create. A family breaking and healing at the same time. Rosie watched from beside Clara. Her little face was confused but gentle. Clara knelt beside her. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Rosie looked at Amelia, hugging the twins, then leaned into Clara's shoulder. "You're my mama too," she whispered. Clara closed her eyes as tears slipped free. Amelia heard it. She reached one hand toward Clara. "Always," Amelia said softly, "you are the mother who saved her when I couldn't." The words should have comforted Clara, but they also warned her that love was about to become complicated. Because Rosie was Amelia's child. But Rosie was Clara's child too. And Everett had just discovered that the poor maid's toddler was wearing his fiancée's necklace not because she had stolen it, but because she might be his daughter. Before anyone could speak, the security guard returned, breathless. "Mr. Hale," he said, "the doll is gone." Vivian stepped backward. Everett turned. "You will not leave this house," he said. Vivian's smile vanished. "You cannot imprison your own mother." "No," Everett said, "but the police can arrest her." A crash sounded from the ballroom. Then another. A guest screamed. Everett moved toward the passage, but the security guard blocked the doorway. "Sir, the east exit alarms just triggered. Someone is trying to flee." Vivian's face changed again. "Not guilt this time. Fear." Amelia gripped Everett's hand. "It's not only her." Everett looked back. "Who else?" Amelia's voice dropped. "Your board chairman, he ordered everything." Before Everett could respond, a man's voice rang from the ballroom, cold and furious. "Bring me the maid and the child, or everyone in this mansion learns what Everett Hale's family really is." Clara pulled Rosie behind her. Everett stepped into the passage, his face hardening into something terrifying. But Noah grabbed his father's hand. "Daddy," he whispered, "the bad man has Rosie's doll." And inside that doll was the proof that could either free Amelia, expose Vivian, and save the children, or destroy every person who knew the truth. The ballroom no longer looked like a charity gala. It looked like a stage after the masks had fallen. Guests stood pressed against the walls, their diamonds and tuxedos useless beneath the emergency lights, while security guards blocked the main doors and whispered into radios. The orchestra had abandoned their instruments. Champagne was spilled across the marble floor, and the white roses that had once decorated the room now lay crushed beneath hurried feet. At the center of the chaos stood Preston Vale, chairman of the Hale Foundation board. He was a tall man with silver hair, a polished smile, and the kind of calm that made people believe him even before he spoke. For years, he had stood beside Everett at hospital openings, orphanage fundraisers, and televised charity events, praising generosity while hiding greed behind perfect speeches. But now his mask was thinner. In one hand, he held Rosie's cloth doll. In the other, he held his phone, recording everything. "Bring me the maid and the child," Preston said again, his voice sharp enough to cut through the whispers, or everyone here will hear how Everett Hale's family hides kidnapped women behind walls. The guests gasped. Everett stepped out of the west hallway slowly, and every person in the ballroom turned toward him. He was not alone. Clara stood behind him, with Rosie in her arms. Amelia leaned on his side, weak but upright, her face pale beneath the chandelier glow that had returned in flickers. Noah and Nora stood close to Miss Alden, but their eyes never left their mother. The moment the guests saw Amelia, the ballroom erupted. Some screamed. Some whispered her name. Some lifted phones. Vivian Hale stood near the staircase, silent and stiff, as if the portrait she had hidden had walked out of the wall to accuse her in front of the world. Preston's face changed for half a second. Only half. But Everett saw the fear. "You kept her alive," Everett said. Preston smiled. "Careful, Everett, people are recording." "Good," Everett replied, "then they will hear everything." Preston lifted the doll slightly. "They will hear what I decide they hear." Clara's stomach twisted. Rosie reached toward the doll. "My baby." Clara held her tighter. "Not yet, sweetheart." Preston looked at the toddler, then at the necklace around her neck. His eyes narrowed with recognition. "So that is where the necklace went," he said. "Vivian told me it vanished at the hospital." Everett turned toward his mother. Vivian's gaze dropped. That small movement was almost a confession. Amelia's hand tightened around Everett's arm. He was there that night. Everett looked back at Preston. "At the hospital." Preston gave a soft laugh. A woman with no money, no family protection, and a habit of stealing documents should not have been so difficult to silence. The room went still. Clara covered Rosie's ear with one hand. Everett's voice lowered. "Choose your next words carefully." Preston ignored the warning and pointed the phone toward Amelia. "Tell them, Amelia, tell all these guests how you broke into Foundation records. Tell them how you tried to ruin a charity that helped thousands." Amelia lifted her chin, though standing clearly cost her strength. "I tried to stop you from stealing from children." Murmurs spread through the crowd. A hospital donor whispered, "Stealing." Preston turned to the guests with smooth, practiced outrage. "This is what grief does to unstable people. She disappeared years ago, and now she returns with a wild story, a maid, and a child wearing stolen jewelry." Clara stepped forward. "The necklace was not stolen." Preston's smile sharpened. "And you expect anyone to believe a maid?" That sentence landed exactly where he wanted it to land. On class. On status. On the old belief that truth wore expensive clothes. Clara felt the insult, but she did not lower her eyes. "No," she said, "I expect them to believe the woman who survived you." A few guests turned toward Amelia again. Preston's smile thinned. Everett took one step closer. "Give me the doll." Preston held it higher. "This filthy little toy contains documents that were copied illegally. If you touch me, my lawyers will bury you in court for years." Everett's expression did not change. "My lawyers can wait." Preston's eyes flicked toward the east exit. It was quick. Too quick for most people. But Clara saw it, because poor people learn to notice where powerful people plan to run. "He's stalling," Clara whispered. Everett heard her. So did Amelia. Preston turned the doll in his hand, feeling along the seams. "Where is it?" he muttered. Clara's breath caught. He did not know how to open it. That was the first gift God had given them all night. When Clara had hidden Amelia's envelope inside Rosie's doll, she had sewn it beneath a double layer of cloth in the back, then covered the stitches with a tiny patch shaped like a yellow star. Rosie thought the star was decoration. Clara knew it was the only thing standing between truth and permanent burial. Preston squeezed the doll harder. Rosie began to whimper. Don't hurt her, baby, Nora cried. Preston looked at the twins and smiled falsely. Children should not be awake for adult problems. Noah stepped forward before Miss Alden could stop him. You're the bad man. Preston's face darkened. Everett moved instantly, placing himself between Preston and his son. Look at me, Everett said, not him. Preston's nostrils flared. You think you are in control because this is your house, but I built the network that protected your name while you played grieving fiancé for cameras. Vivian whispered, Preston, stop. But Preston had already lost the patience that made him dangerous. No, he snapped. You stop. You were happy to take the protection when Amelia found the accounts. You were happy to let me handle the hospital, the documents, and the staff. Now you want to stand there like a frightened grandmother. Everett turned slowly toward Vivian. Staff, he repeated. Clara felt cold move through her. Preston realized his mistake. Vivian closed her eyes. Amelia's voice trembled, but her words were clear. The night I disappeared, someone changed the security roster. Someone removed the driver I trusted. Someone sent my nurse away. Everett stared at his mother. Vivian's lips trembled. I did not know he would take it that far. Amelia looked at her. You locked the gallery door from the outside. Vivian's face crumpled, but only for a second. I wanted time, that is all, time to protect the family. You stole years, Everett said. Vivian flinched. Rosie touched Clara's cheek. Mama, why is everybody angry? Clara kissed her forehead, because some people are afraid of the truth. Preston laughed harshly. Truth is what people with power can prove. He shook the doll again, searching for the hidden compartment. Clara's pulse hammered. If he found the patch, he could destroy the documents before anyone understood what they were. Then Rosie leaned close to Clara's ear. The blue stone opens, she whispered. Clara froze. What? Rosie touched her necklace. The singing lady told me in the dream. Clara stared at the pendant. The blue teardrop stone. For 3 years, she had thought it was only a jewel, only a symbol, only a memory Amelia had given her daughter. But Amelia heard Rosie and looked sharply at the necklace. Clara, she whispered, the clasp. Everett turned. What about it? Amelia swallowed. The necklace was not only sentimental. Everett gave it to me after his father died. It belonged to his grandmother. The pendant has a hidden locket beneath the stone. Vivian's eyes widened. Preston stopped moving. That was when Clara understood. The doll carried proof, but the necklace carried the key to finding where the rest of it was hidden. Everett stepped close to Rosie and crouched, his voice gentler than the chaos around them deserved. Rosie, he said softly, may I see the necklace? Rosie looked at Clara first. Clara nodded, though her heart ached at how quickly the child had learned to ask permission before trusting the rich man who might be her father. Rosie lifted the pendant. Everett took it carefully, turning it beneath the light. His fingers found a tiny groove behind the blue stone. He pressed. The pendant clicked open. Inside was not a photograph. It was a folded strip of paper, so thin it had survived hidden beneath the stone for years. Everett removed it with trembling hands. On it were 5 words written in Amelia's handwriting. Maple Ridge Bank, Box 714. Preston's face drained. Vivian covered her mouth. Amelia exhaled like a woman seeing daylight after years underground. Everett looked at Preston. Now I know where the originals are. The guests began whispering again, louder this time. A donor near the front said, the bank will have records. Another said, this is criminal. Preston's polished calm finally broke. He grabbed Nora. It happened so fast that the room screamed before Everett could move. Preston pulled the little girl in front of him, one arm around her shoulders. not hurting her, but holding her tightly enough to freeze everyone in place. "No one moves," Preston said. Everett went still. Nora's eyes filled with terror. Noah screamed her name. Amelia nearly collapsed, but Clara caught her arm. Preston backed toward the east exit with Nora in front of him and Rosie's doll clutched in his other hand. "You want the child safe? Then I walk out with the doll, and you all forget the bank box." Everett's hands curled into fists, but his voice remained controlled. "Let my daughter go." Preston smiled, but sweat shone at his temple. "You should have stayed a grieving man, Everett. Grief made you weak, but truth will make you poor." Nora trembled. Then Rosie did something no adult expected. She slipped from Clara's arms and walked forward. "Rosie, no," Clara cried. Everett reached for her, but Rosie was already moving across the marble floor, small and steady, her necklace open against her chest. Preston looked down at her, confused. Rosie held out both hands. "You can take my baby," she said softly, looking at the doll, "but give Nora back. She's scared." Nora sobbed. Preston stared at the toddler as if kindness were a language he had never learned. "Stay back," he warned. But Rosie began humming. The lullaby. Zovd. Unshaken. Noah stopped crying. Nora's breathing slowed. Even Amelia closed her eyes, one hand pressed to her mouth. Preston's grip loosened by one careless inch. That inch was all Everett needed. He moved fast, pulling Nora away and turning his body between her and Preston while security rushed forward. Preston tried to run, but Clara stepped sideways and knocked a rolling service cart into his path. He stumbled. The doll flew from his hand. Rosie gasped as it landed near the roses. A security guard pinned Preston against the wall, and another retrieved the doll. The ballroom erupted, but Everett heard only Nora crying into his chest. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you." Amelia reached for her daughter, and Everett carried Nora to her. The moment Nora touched Amelia, the child broke into quiet sobs. Noah ran to them too. For the first time in years, the twins were in their mother's arms. Clara picked up Rosie and held her close, shaking from fear and relief. Rosie looked over Clara's shoulder at the security guards, taking Preston away. "Is he going to the bad place?" she asked. Clara stroked her hair. "He is going where people answer for what they do." Everett turned toward Clara. His expression was unreadable at first, but then he looked at Rosie, at the necklace, at Amelia, at the twins, and finally at the doll. "Open it," he said. Clara took the doll from the guard. Her fingers found the yellow star patch. She remembered sewing it at midnight in their tiny cottage, Rosie asleep beside her, the envelope folded carefully beneath the stuffing. She remembered whispering a promise to a woman she thought she might never see again. "Keep her safe. Keep the truth safe." Now both promises were standing in the same room. Clara pulled the stitches loose. Inside the doll was the sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed, but the seal remained intact. Everett did not take it from Clara. Instead, he looked at Amelia. Amelia nodded. Only then did Clara hand it to him. Everett opened the envelope. Inside were copied bank transfers, foundation ledgers, names, dates, and signatures. Preston Vale, Vivian Hale, 2 board members, 3 shell organizations, medical grants that never reached sick children. The evidence was not just enough to accuse. It was enough to destroy an empire of lies. Everett's hands shook as he read. Then he looked at Vivian. His mother stood near the staircase, no longer proud, no longer untouchable, no longer protected by the name she had claimed to defend. "I did it for the family," Vivian whispered. Everett's voice was quiet, but it carried across the ballroom. No, you did it for the name. Amelia was the family. My children are the family. Rosie is the family. Clara protected the family when you betrayed it. Vivian's face crumbled. The police arrived minutes later. No one applauded when they took Vivian away. No one spoke when Preston, still shouting about lawyers and reputation, was escorted through the front doors. But every guest watched, and every camera recorded. The Hale family secret had not stayed behind marble walls. It had stepped into the light, wearing a poor maid's courage and a toddler's necklace. Later, after statements were taken and the guests were dismissed, the mansion became quiet in a way it had not been quiet for years. Not empty, not haunted, just tired. Amelia sat on the ballroom steps with Noah on one side and Nora on the other, both children pressed against her as though afraid she might vanish if they let go. Everett stood a few feet away, watching them with eyes full of love and guilt. Clara stood near the servants' hallway, Rosie asleep against her shoulder. She knew what came next would hurt. Questions, lawyers, birth certificates, custody, truth. Rosie was Rose Amelia Hale. The name on the hospital bracelet had said so. And if Rosie belonged to Amelia and Everett by blood, then Clara was not her mother in the way the law would recognize. She lowered her face to Rosie's hair and breathed in the familiar scent of soap, milk, and the lavender oil she used after baths. Everett approached slowly. Clara stiffened. He noticed. I will not take her from you tonight, he said. Clara looked up, tears already burning. Tonight. Pain crossed his face. Clara. She calls me Mama, Clara whispered. I know. She cries for me when she wakes up. She likes oatmeal with cinnamon but hates strawberries. She won't sleep unless the closet door is closed. She asks why stars follow us home. She thinks the moon is God's nightlight. Clara's voice broke. I know she may be yours, but I raised her. Everett's eyes filled. Amelia, listening from the steps, slowly stood. She was weak, but she walked toward Clara with a strength that had survived the dark. No one is taking her from you, Amelia said. Clara stared at her. Amelia touched Rosie's sleeping cheek. I lost years with my daughter because people treated family like property. I will not heal by doing the same thing to you. Clara's lips trembled. What does that mean? Amelia looked at Everett. Everett nodded, though grief and gratitude fought across his face. It means, Amelia said softly, Rosie has two mothers now if you can bear sharing her. Clara broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She simply folded forward around Rosie, and Amelia wrapped her arms around both of them. Everett looked away for a moment, overcome. Noah and Nora came closer. Nora touched Rosie's tiny shoe. Can she stay? Clara looked at Amelia. Amelia looked at Everett. Everett looked at the children who had suffered, because adults loved power more than truth. Yes, he said, she can stay. For the first time all night, Rosie stirred, opened sleepy eyes, and looked at Everett. Are you mad I showed the necklace? She asked. Everett knelt before her. No, he said, his voice thick. You did what no one else could do. Rosie blinked. I helped. Everett smiled through tears. You brought everyone home. Rosie looked at the twins, then at Amelia, then at Clara. Then she touched the blue stone and whispered, the singing lady isn't sad now. Everyone looked toward the west hallway. The gallery door stood open. Amelia's portrait could be seen in the distance, no longer locked away. But beneath it, something caught Clara's eye. A fresh white lily lay on the floor. No one had placed it there. And tucked under the flower was a folded note. Everett walked toward it slowly, picked it up, and read the words written in a hand he recognized from his father's old letters. His face changed. Amelia whispered, What is it? Everett looked at her, then at Clara, then at Rosie. The bank box was not the final secret, he said. Clara's heart began pounding again. On the note were 7 words. Ask Vivian what happened to my son. The note shook in Everett's hand, but the 7 words on it seemed heavier than the mansion itself. Ask Vivian what happened to my son. For a long moment, no one spoke. Amelia stood beside the ballroom steps with Noah and Nora clinging to her gown. Clara held Rosie against her chest, and Everett stared at the paper as though his dead father had reached from the grave and placed one final accusation in his palm. The Hale mansion had survived police sirens, hidden rooms, stolen charity money, and a mother's betrayal, but this note carried a different kind of danger. It did not point at money. It pointed at blood. Everett looked toward the front doors where the police had taken Vivian minutes earlier, but then his eyes moved to the west hallway. Who put this here? He asked. No one answered. The servants near the kitchen looked down. Security exchanged confused glances. Then Mrs. Voss stepped out from behind the service door. The old housekeeper's clipboard was gone now, and without it, she looked less like the ruler of the servants' wing and more like a woman who had carried a secret too long. I did, sir, she said. Everett turned slowly. You. Mrs. Voss nodded, but her hands trembled. Your father gave it to me before he died. Everett's voice tightened. My father died 15 years ago. Yes, Mrs. Voss said, and for 15 years I told myself silence was loyalty. Clara watched the housekeeper with new eyes. Mrs. Voss had always seemed strict, cold, and impossible to impress, but now Clara saw the fear behind all that discipline. This was not a woman who enjoyed obeying the powerful. This was a woman who had survived them. Everett unfolded the note again. What son? Mrs. Voss looked toward Amelia, then toward the children, and finally at Clara. The son your mother made disappear before you were old enough to remember him. Amelia covered her mouth. Everett did not move. Noah whispered, Daddy. Everett blinked, as if remembering the children were there. Amelia knelt carefully despite her weakness and drew the twins close. Go with Miss Alden for a moment, sweetheart. No, Nora said immediately. Every time we leave, bad things happen. The truth of that broke something in Amelia's face. Everett crouched in front of the twins. No more secrets from you forever, I promise, but this part is grown-up pain. I need you safe while I understand it. Noah looked at Rosie asleep in Clara's arms. Can Rosie come too? Clara hesitated, but Amelia nodded gently. The 3 children were led to the sitting room beside the ballroom, where Miss Alden left the door open and stayed within view. Only then did Everett face Mrs. Voss again. Tell me everything. Mrs. Voss drew a slow breath. Before your father married Vivian, he loved a woman named Grace Miller. She worked in this house as a tutor for your older cousin, but your grandmother never approved of her. Grace became pregnant, and your father wanted to marry her. Everett's jaw tightened. I have never heard her name. No one was allowed to say it, Mrs. Voss replied. That was the Hale way long before Vivian perfected it. Clara felt those words settle deep inside her. No one was allowed to say it. Amelia's name had been buried the same way. Rosie's identity had nearly been buried the same way. Now another ghost had stepped into the room. Mrs. Voss continued. Grace gave birth to a boy. Your father named him Daniel. Everett's face changed. Daniel, he repeated. The name seemed to unlock something small and far away. A child's memory. A boy laughing near the fountain. A hand helping him climb a tree. A voice saying, Don't tell mother I let you jump. Everett touched the back of a chair as if the room had tilted. I had dreams about a boy. Mrs. Voss nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. They were not dreams. Amelia reached for Everett's hand. He took it, but his gaze stayed on Mrs. Voss. What happened to him? Mrs. Voss swallowed. Vivian happened. The answer was quiet, but it struck like thunder. Everett closed his eyes. Mrs. Voss went on. After your father married Vivian, she discovered Daniel still existed. He was 6. You were almost 3. Your father visited him in secret and planned to bring him officially into the family after your grandfather died. But Daniel was firstborn, Amelia said softly. Yes, Mrs. Voss said, and that meant Daniel had a claim, not just to money, but to truth. Vivian feared that if your father acknowledged him, her son, Everett, would no longer be the clean public heir she wanted the world to see. Everett opened his eyes, and guilt moved through them, though he had been only a child. She got rid of him, he said. Mrs. Voss nodded once. She sent Grace away with money and threats, but Daniel was not sent with her. Vivian claimed he was ill and had him placed in a private residential school under another name. Your father found out too late. Amelia's voice trembled. Did he try to bring him back? He tried for years, Mrs. Voss said, but every record had been changed. Every payment had been hidden through lawyers. Vivian told him Daniel had died during an outbreak at the school. Everett turned away sharply, breathing hard. The mansion seemed to press around him. All his life, he had believed his mother was proud, controlling, and cold, but now he saw something worse. Vivian had not only hidden Amelia, she had practiced on Daniel first. She had learned how to erase people. And the Hale name had rewarded her silence. Everett looked back at Mrs. Voss. Why did my father give you the note? He suspected Daniel was alive near the end, she said. He was sick, but he was searching again. He told me if anything happened to him before he found proof, I should give you the note when you were strong enough to stand against Vivian. Everett's laugh was bitter and broken. You waited 15 years. Mrs. Voss flinched. Clara expected her to defend herself, but the housekeeper did not. Yes, she said, I was afraid. I had children of my own, a mortgage, a sick husband. Vivian knew everything about everyone who worked here. She knew how to ruin people without touching them. Clara understood that fear too well. Poor people were often judged for silence by people who had never been punished for speaking. But tonight, Mrs. Voss continued, when I saw Clara stand in front of Vivian, when I saw Amelia walk out alive, and when I saw that little girl wearing the necklace, I knew the house was finally telling the truth, whether I helped or not. Everett looked toward the sitting room, where Rosie slept between Noah and Nora on a velvet sofa, all 3 children exhausted by secrets they had never created. Then he looked at Clara. This is what happens when people protect names instead of children, he said quietly. Clara held his gaze, then stopped protecting the name. That sentence landed in him. Not as an insult, as a command. Everett straightened. For years, the Hale name had been a crown, a shield, and a prison. It had made him rich, respected, and feared, but it had also hidden his fiancée behind a wall, stolen his daughter into poverty, robbed his twins of their mother, and buried an innocent boy until even his own brother remembered him only as a dream. Everett took out his phone and called his chief legal officer. When the woman answered, he did not greet her. Freeze every foundation account, he said. Notify the Attorney General's office. Open every archived family trust, every sealed payment, every private school transfer, and every medical grant tied to my mother, Preston Vale, or my father's old estate. He listened for only a moment. Then his voice hardened. No, not tomorrow, now. Amelia watched him with tears in her eyes. Everett ended the call and turned to Mrs. Voss. Do you know where Daniel is? Mrs. Voss wiped her cheek. No, sir, but I know the name they gave him. Everett stepped closer. Mrs. Voss whispered, Daniel Miller became Daniel Cross. Clara went still. The name struck her like a bell. Daniel Cross. She knew that name. Not well, but enough. Everett saw her face change. What is it? Clara hesitated. When I worked nights at St. Bartholomew's, there was a maintenance supervisor named Daniel Cross. Quiet man, kind. He fixed broken heaters in the maternity ward and brought coffee to the nurses during double shifts. Amelia's eyes widened. The hospital. Clara nodded slowly. He was there the night Rosie was born. The room shifted again. A missing brother. A hidden mother. A stolen child. All roads leading back to the same hospital. Everett's voice lowered. Did he know Amelia? Clara searched her memory. A tall man in a blue work shirt. Gentle eyes. A scar near his right eyebrow. A toolbox in one hand. She remembered him standing outside Amelia's room after midnight, arguing quietly with a nurse. She remembered hearing him say, "That woman is not safe here." She remembered him bringing Clara an extra blanket for the baby. "He helped us," Clara said. "I thought he was just being kind." Amelia gripped Everett's hand. "Maybe he knew who I was." Mrs. Voss nodded through tears. "Daniel had your father's heart. Even as a boy, he protected people before he protected himself." Everett looked as if he had been struck by grief and hope at the same time. "Find him," he said to his security chief, who had been listening near the door. "Daniel Cross, former maintenance supervisor at St. Bartholomew's. Start there." The security chief nodded and left. The mansion settled into uneasy silence. Then a small voice spoke from the sitting room doorway. "Daddy." Everyone turned. Nora stood barefoot in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Behind her, Noah held Rosie's hand. Rosie was awake now, her blue necklace resting outside her dress. Nora looked at Everett, then at Amelia. "Are there more people Grandma hid?" The question was simple, but it held the whole terrible lesson of the night. Everett walked to his daughter and knelt. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I promise I will look for every one of them." Noah looked at Clara. "Even if they're poor." Clara's throat tightened. Everett looked at his son. "Especially if they are poor," he said, "because those are the people this family was taught not to see." Rosie tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Mama, is the singing lady staying?" Amelia came closer and knelt beside Clara. "Yes," Amelia said softly, "if you'll let me." Rosie studied her face, then reached out and touched Amelia's cheek. "You cried in the wall," Rosie said. Amelia closed her eyes. "I did." Rosie's little hand moved to Amelia's hair. "You can sleep in the big room now." A broken laugh escaped Amelia. Everett bowed his head. Clara turned away, but Amelia caught her hand. "No," Amelia said gently, "stay." Clara looked at her. "You don't have to stand in the servants' hallway anymore," Amelia continued. "Not tonight, not after what you carried for me." The words filled Clara with warmth, but also fear. She had spent years wanting safety, not luxury. She did not want a place at the rich man's table if it meant losing herself, and she did not want gratitude to become another cage. Everett seemed to understand. "You will decide what comes next," he said. "For yourself and for Rosie, no pressure, no hidden papers, no one forcing a mother to disappear because another family wants comfort." Clara's eyes filled again. That was when the front door opened. The security chief returned, breathless, holding a tablet. "Sir," he said, "we found Daniel Cross." Everett stood. Amelia held Rosie closer. Clara felt the room tense around the new revelation. "Where is he?" Everett asked. The security chief swallowed, outside the gate. Everett frowned. "Now." "Yes, sir. He arrived 10 minutes ago and asked for Clara Bennett." Clara's heart stopped. "For me?" The security chief nodded. He said if the necklace had finally been seen, then the family would need the last witness. Everett looked at Clara, then toward the front doors. Outside, beyond the marble steps, a man stood under the security lights with grey in his hair, a worn coat on his shoulders, and a small wooden box in his hands. Even from the doorway, Clara recognized him. Daniel Cross, the quiet hospital maintenance man. The forgotten son. The brother Everett had been taught to forget. Everett walked toward the entrance slowly. Daniel looked up. For a moment, the two men stared at each other across 15 stolen years. Then Daniel said the one sentence that made every secret in the mansion feel unfinished. "I know who ordered Amelia moved from the hospital." Everett's face darkened. "Preston?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not Preston." He looked past Everett, directly at Amelia. It was someone still inside this house. Daniel Cross stood beneath the security lights like a man who had spent his whole life outside gates that should have opened for him. His coat was worn at the cuffs, his shoes were dusty, and the wooden box in his hands looked older than every polished ornament inside the Hale mansion, but his eyes did not lower when Everett stepped onto the front terrace. For a moment, nobody moved. Everett stared at the man who should have been his brother, and Daniel stared back at the man who had inherited everything Daniel had been erased from. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of stolen birthdays, missing photographs, changed names, and a mother's cruelty dressed as family protection. Everett's voice was rough. "You said someone still inside this house ordered Amelia moved from the hospital." Daniel nodded, "Yes." Amelia stood behind Everett, one hand on the doorframe, her body weak but her eyes alert. Clara held Rosie close, while Noah and Nora stood near Miss Alden, too tired to cry but too frightened to sleep. "Who?" Everett asked. Daniel looked past him into the mansion. "The doctor." Clara's stomach turned cold. Everett frowned. "What doctor?" Daniel's gaze moved toward the ballroom. "The man you introduced tonight as the twins' pediatric specialist." The words traveled through Clara like a warning bell. The pediatric specialist. The calm man who had whispered breathing exercises to Noah and Nora before Rosie appeared. The man who stood near the staircase during the first screams. The man no one had questioned because he wore a suit, carried a medical bag, and spoke with the confidence of someone rich families trusted. Amelia whispered, "Dr. Reeves." Everett turned sharply, "Clayton Reeves." Daniel's jaw tightened. That is what he calls himself now. At St. Bartholomew, he was Dr. Clayton Rowe. Clara remembered him then. Not fully at first. Only pieces. A white coat passing through the maternity ward at midnight. A nurse suddenly refusing to answer questions. A man telling Clara to leave Amelia's room because family matters were being handled. A cold glance when Clara had refused. She looked at Daniel. He was there. Daniel nodded. He signed the transfer order. Everett's face hardened. Transfer to where? Daniel looked toward the west side of the mansion, where the hidden room waited behind Amelia's portrait. "Here." Amelia closed her eyes, as if the truth had touched a bruise that had never healed. Everett turned toward his security chief. "Find Reeves." The security chief moved quickly into the house, but Daniel caught Everett's arm before he could follow. "Careful," Daniel said. "He won't run like Preston. Men like Reeves survive by making themselves necessary." Everett looked down at Daniel's hand on his sleeve. Daniel released him at once, but Everett did not step away. For the first time, the billionaire and the forgotten son stood close enough to look like brothers. "What is in the box?" Everett asked. Daniel lifted it slightly. "The things your father left with me before Vivian's people took me away." Mrs. Voss, standing near the foyer, gasped softly. Daniel saw her and nodded once. "Hello, Margaret." Mrs. Voss covered her mouth. "Daniel." Clara looked between them. Another piece fell into place. Mrs. Voss had known him as a child. She had helped remember him when the mansion was ordered to forget. Daniel opened the wooden box. Inside were old photographs, a small toy car, a birth certificate with the name Daniel Hale crossed out and Daniel Miller written beneath it, and a folded letter sealed with faded wax. Everett stared at the birth certificate. His throat worked, but no words came. Daniel did not hand it to him yet. "My mother died believing your father abandoned us," Daniel said. "I hated the Hale name for years because I thought he chose comfort over us. Then I found the first letter." Everett looked up. Daniel removed the folded letter but kept it in his hand. "Your father searched for me. Vivian intercepted the letters. Preston buried the payments. Reeves signed the false medical reports that made me look unstable, so no court would believe anything I said as a child." Amelia's face tightened with recognition. "That is why he helped them with me." Daniel nodded. He had done it before. From inside the mansion, a sudden shout echoed. Everyone turned. The security chief rushed back into the foyer. "Sir, Dr. Reeves is gone." Everett's voice sharpened. "Gone where?" "We found his medical bag in the library, but he is not there." Nora suddenly grabbed Miss Alden's skirt. "He said he would check on Grandma." Everett turned. "Vivian." The officer stationed near the parlor where Vivian had been held stepped forward, pale. "Sir, Mrs. Hale said she felt faint. Dr. Reeves asked to examine her before the police transport. I thought." Everett did not wait. He ran. Daniel followed. Clara handed Rosie to Amelia for one careful moment, then rushed after them before anyone could stop her. She did not know why she ran, only that poor people often survive danger by noticing what others missed, and tonight every ignored person had become important. They reached the small parlor near the east wing. The door was open. The chair where Vivian had been sitting was empty. A police officer stood outside, confused and ashamed, while the lace curtains near the side window moved in the night breeze. Everett crossed the room in 2 strides. The window latch had been forced. Vivian was gone. So was Dr. Reeves. On the table lay a single syringe from Reeves's medical bag and a folded napkin with handwriting on it. Everett picked it up. His face darkened. Daniel read over his shoulder. Clara stepped close enough to see the words. "One secret remains. Let me leave, or the children lose their mother again." Amelia appeared in the doorway with Rosie in her arms and the twins behind her. Everett turned quickly. "You should not be here." Amelia looked at the note in his hand. "I have been hidden long enough." Rosie touched Amelia's cheek. "The bad doctor smells like sharp soap." Clara froze. "What did you say?" Rosie rubbed her nose. "Sharp soap, like the little room." Daniel looked at her carefully. "What little room?" Rosie pointed toward the back of the house, where the lady cried before the wall. Amelia's breath caught. Clara crouched before Rosie. "Sweetheart, did Dr. Reeves take you somewhere before tonight?" Rosie shook her head. "Not me, the singing lady." Everyone turned to Amelia. Amelia's eyes widened as memory returned in pieces. "The conservatory," she whispered. "Before they moved me behind the portrait, they kept me somewhere with glass walls. I could smell orchids. Reeves gave me medicine there." Everett's face went cold. The conservatory had been closed for years after Vivian claimed mold had damaged the foundation. But Clara knew the servants still watered the plants once a week. She also knew the conservatory had a service exit leading to the old carriage path. "They're going through the greenhouse," Clara said. Everett looked at her. "You know the way." "Yes. Show me." They moved fast through the east corridor, past the kitchen, past the pantry, and into a narrow servants' passage that smelled of lemon polish and old brick. Daniel carried the wooden box under one arm. Everett moved ahead like a storm held inside a man. Clara stayed close, listening for footsteps. Behind them, Amelia insisted on coming, but Miss Alden finally convinced her to remain near the children with two officers. Even then, Amelia stood at the corridor entrance, watching until the darkness swallowed them. The conservatory door appeared at the end of the passage. Glass panels reflected the moonlight. Inside, the plants were tall, overgrown, and twisted, making the room look less like a garden and more like a secret trying to grow wild. Everett pushed the door open. The smell hit them first. Orchids, damp soil, and sharp antiseptic soap. Rosie had been right. Near the far exit, Vivian stood in her silver gown, one hand pressed to the wall for support. Dr. Clayton Reeves stood beside her with a small black case. He did not look frightened when Everett entered. He looked disappointed. "Everett," Reeves said calmly, "you were always more emotional than your mother." Everett moved toward him, but Daniel stepped forward first. Reeves saw Daniel and smiled faintly. "Well," he said, "the dead boy returns." Daniel's hand tightened around the wooden box. "You made sure no one believed I was alive. I made sure a family crisis did not become a public scandal." "You drugged records, children, mothers, and courts," Daniel said. "Call it what it is." Reeves sighed. "Morality is easier for people who never had to manage powerful families." Clara stepped from behind Everett. "No, morality is hardest for people who think power makes them God." Reeves looked at her with mild irritation. "The maid who caused all this." "The maid who saw what you missed," Clara replied. Vivian's face twisted. "Clara, please help me." The word stunned everyone. Help! Vivian Hale had never asked a servant for help in her life. Clara looked at her, but she did not move closer. "You helped no one when Amelia begged," Clara said. "You helped no one when Rosie needed safety. You helped no one when your grandchildren cried." Vivian's eyes filled. "I know." Everett looked at his mother, and for one painful second, Clara thought he might soften. Then Reeves opened his black case. Daniel saw the movement first. "Everett." Reeves grabbed a small vial, but Everett struck the case from his hand before he could use it. Glass tubes shattered across the tiled floor. Security burst in through the other entrance, weapons lowered but ready. Reeves lifted both hands slowly. His calm finally cracked. "You have no idea what I protected you from," he said. Everett stepped close. "Tell me." Reeves smiled with a tired cruelty. "Your father was not the saint you think. He knew about the charity accounts before he died. He planned to confess everything publicly, but he also planned to name Daniel as his rightful firstborn." Everett glanced at Daniel. Daniel went still. Vivian whispered, "Clayton, don't." Reeves ignored her. "The Hale Empire would not have gone to you, Everett, not all of it. Your mother did not create this war. Your father did when he tried to correct one sin by exposing 100 more." Everett's face did not change, but Clara saw the blow land. Daniel looked at the wooden box in his arms. The old birth certificate. The father's letters. The stolen name. He spoke quietly. "I did not come for an empire." Reeves looked amused. "That is what poor men say before someone offers them one." Daniel stepped closer. "I came because a woman was hidden, children were suffering, and Clara Bennett deserved to stop carrying your crimes in silence." Clara's eyes strung. Reeves looked from Daniel to Clara, then to Everett. "You are all sentimental fools," he said. "No," Everett replied. "We are the people you underestimated." Security moved in and restrained Reeves. Vivian sank into a wrought iron chair as if her bones had finally given up pretending. But before the officers could lead Reeves away, he looked at Amelia, standing in the corridor entrance. "There is still one thing you do not remember," he called. Amelia froze. Everett turned. "Enough." Reeves smiled. "Ask her why she went to the hospital alone that night." Amelia's face went pale. Clara looked at her. Everett looked at her too. Amelia's hand moved unconsciously to her heart. "I was meeting someone," she whispered. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Amelia looked at Rosie, then at Noah and Nora behind her, then at Everett. Her voice shook. "I was going to meet Everett's father's lawyer." Everett frowned. "Why?" Amelia swallowed. "Because he said he had proof that Daniel was alive." Daniel stared at her. Everett turned back toward Reeves, but the doctor was smiling as officers pulled him away. Then Reeves said the line that froze everyone in the conservatory. "The lawyer never made it to the hospital." Daniel's wooden box slipped from his hands and hit the floor. The lid broke open. Photographs scattered across the tiles. And beneath the photographs, hidden under the lining of the box, was a second birth certificate. Clara picked it up with trembling hands. This one was not Daniel. It was Everett. And the father's name had been changed. The second birth certificate trembled in Clara's hands, but it was Everett whose world seemed to split open. For one terrible moment, the conservatory held only the sound of broken glass settling on the tiles. The orchids stood around them in heavy silence, their white petals glowing beneath the emergency lights, while the old document in Clara's fingers turned every inheritance, every portrait, every family speech, and every polished lie into something unstable. Everett stepped toward her. Clara did not want to hand it to him, but truth had already punished them for hiding too long. He took the paper. His eyes moved across the lines. Name: Everett James Hale. Mother: Vivian Sterling Hale. Father: Richard Alden Hale. But beneath Richard's name, the paper had been scraped thin, as if someone had erased a truth and written a dynasty over it. Under the light, the old indentation remained. A different name. Preston Vale. Everett did not react at first. That was what frightened Clara most. No shout. No accusation. No dramatic collapse. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that came when pain went too deep for the body to understand. Daniel picked up one of the fallen photographs from the floor. It showed two boys near the fountain, Daniel, about 6, smiling with one arm around a much smaller Everett, who was laughing with both hands full of leaves. Daniel stared at the picture. Everett stared at the certificate. Then both brothers looked at Vivian. Vivian sat in the wrought iron chair, her silver gown stained with dirt from the conservatory floor, her face stripped of the cold perfection that had once ruled the mansion. Everett's voice was quiet. "Is this true?" Vivian closed her eyes. That was answer enough. Amelia gripped the doorframe. "Everett." He lifted one hand, not to silence her cruelly, but because if anyone touched his grief too soon, he might break. "All my life," he said, looking at Vivian, "you told me the Hale name was everything." Vivian's lips trembled. "You told me I had to protect it," he continued. "You told me Daniel was a dream, Amelia was dangerous, Clara was beneath us, and poor people only wanted what we had." His hand tightened around the certificate. "But I was the lie you were protecting." Vivian shook her head. "No." Everett's eyes flashed. "No. You were my son," she whispered. "That is not what I asked." Vivian looked at Preston's name on the paper, as if it had crawled out of the past to accuse her. "Yes," she said at last, "Preston was your biological father." The words settled over the conservatory like ash. Everett stepped back. Daniel looked away, but not in triumph. There was no victory in watching another man lose the story of his life. Clara held Rosie closer, though the toddler was too tired to understand the full meaning of what had happened. Noah and Nora stood near Amelia, their small faces frightened by the pain in the adults around them. Everett turned toward the hallway, where officers had taken Preston away. Did he know? Vivian gave a broken laugh. He never let me forget. Amelia's eyes sharpened. That is how he controlled you. Vivian looked at her with old resentment, but the fire was weak now. You always thought you understood everything. No, Amelia said. I only understood fear when I saw it. Vivian's face twisted. For the first time, Clara saw that beneath Vivian's cruelty was not strength. It was panic that had learned to wear diamonds. Vivian clasped her trembling hands together. I was young when I met Richard. My family was ruined. Preston was ambitious, charming, and already close to the Hale business. I made one mistake before the wedding, and when I discovered I was pregnant, Preston said Richard would never marry me if he knew. Everett's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Richard loved me, Vivian whispered. Or I thought he did. He married me quickly, and when you were born, everyone celebrated the Hale heir. I told myself blood did not matter because Richard raised you. Daniel's voice cut in, low and steady, but blood mattered when it came to me. Vivian looked at him.